what's misunderstood?
Well, I think we need, what's misunderstood is that we have learned a lot about these diseases. We've learned a lot about how to help people, and yet we are still kind of cemented in these old beliefs.
I don't know if I personally feel misunderstood. I feel like the public totally misunderstands what addiction is. They don't get it. They think it's a choice.
Well, I feel misunderstood in a lot of areas. First of all, people look at my wife and I and said, how can this happen to your family? They don't understand this is happening to everyone's family.
Good evening. I'm Anthony DeBruzzi. Over the next half hour, we're going to hear from those three Wisconsinites in their own words about the biggest stigmas they hope to shatter when it comes to addiction. National Recovery Month first started in 1989, and every year the spotlight is put on best treatment practices and supporting those on their recovery journey. Tonight, we're going to share some of those resources with you. But first, the stories. We begin with Tom Farley Jr. I sat down with the brother of late actor and comedian Chris Farley in Madison for this conversation.
The Farleyness of it all is we do crave attention. So we need that validation, so I can find a crowd. You give me a microphone and an audience, and I'm ready to go. Yeah, Tom Farley, born and raised here in Madison. And big family, crazy Farley Irish family. Barb was the oldest, our sister, and then it was me, Chris, Kevin, and Johnny. So 4 boys, and it was just chaos.
So I'm my little brother. My brother Johnny. Your brother? He's an idiot from day one. Game boy, he didn't say a word on the car ride ever.
So my mother's from Boston, so she had this kind of very Eastern, really had us programmed, and and Dad was just all about the chaos. So it was just this back and forth between, Mom trying to maintain order, my dad just really kind of thriving on the chaos. In our family, we checked 3 pretty significant boxes in the sense that we had a pretty significant family history of alcoholism. We were Irish and we lived in Wisconsin. So checking any number of those boxes would have been enough. We checked all 3. And in all 3 of those cases, drinking was very normative. That's what you did. It was part of your identity. If you were Farley, you drank. If you're Irish, you drank. If you're from Wisconsin, well, you drink. And so we just kind of thought this is what we did. And, we didn't, start drinking at an early age. For us, the drinking age was 18, and we pretty much didn't start till around then. But it's when we got into particularly when Chris and I went to New York, and people were like, wow, that's a little excessive. And we thought we were just doing what everyone else did. My first kind of warning sign, at least for Chris, was, he was about to lose his dream job because of this disease. And I really first became kind of in touch with the concept long before 9/11 of what a first responder, is. Because my family was out here in Wisconsin, and it was Chris and I in New York, and I just saw him struggling. I'm like, all right, we got to do something here. When Chris was going through this, it was still it was all about his drinking and drugs, and it was a behavior thing. We need to get him to stop this behavior. There was no asking why he's doing this. You're taking your drugs because it's a lifestyle choice, or it's you chose to do this. That's one of the biggest stigmas we deal with all the time.
body still there? Can you tell us what you're doing here today?
No.
You know, learning that your brother died by seeing it, you know, played out on CNN, you know, that was, yeah, there was really no time to deal with the shock and the grief. You know, it was just, we were under the spotlight. We still kind of, you know, try to cling to this memory of Chris as a brother, you know, as a son. And I don't think, you know, any of us in our family want to lose that. So that's when I started going into schools and started to tell my story, again, mostly for, you know, to deal with my grief. But I just thought that, you know, let's make something positive out of this. The people around people in addiction are in isolation too, and that's what stigma does. It keeps you in that isolation because of fear, lack of knowledge, lack of, you know, I don't know what to do, and it isolates. Now you've got, you know, 2 or 3 rings out from this person that needs help that are all, now we're all in isolation. And the problem was when you have somebody like Chris that was kind of had more of an issue than the rest of us, it was easier for us, all of us, to point to Chris and say, well, we're not that bad, so I guess we're okay. When Chris was still alive, I'm like, you know, wow, this drinking thing in our family is pretty significant. So, and I had, you know, 3 young kids, growing family, and I'm like, I don't want my kids now to grow up in the environment that we grew up in. Just, you know, not that it was really bad or anything, but it, like, alcohol was always around. And so I would have these moments when I would stop drinking, and I would get 5 years of sobriety under my belt, only to, you know, have that. But all I was doing was being sober, you know, not drinking, and thinking that was enough. I was always trying to put this person out to the world that I thought they wanted to see, you know, through the expectation they have, whether like, this is what a Farley's supposed to look like, or this is what Chris Farley's brother is supposed to be like. So I was controlling and manipulating all these relationships, you know, from my kids to my ex-wife to my, you know, like, I need you to do this so I can be this person. And that was a problem. You can't love Chris Farley. You can't love my brother anymore, at least as far as I'm concerned, and still carry this stigma about the disease that he died from.
We played cricket together in Piccadilly Circus. Why, he whacked the ball and I'd run and go get it.
Look what we lost. You know, it's not so much about the drugs and things like that, and the overdose, and, you know, and how he died. It's the really, like, that we don't have him anymore. Somebody that, you know, should not be defined by how they died and their disease and their addictions. They should be defined by, you know, they were a sibling, a brother, a friend that is no longer with us.
Why did you choose to attend this party?
Because it looks like it's going to be a good time. It looks like a lot of fun. Now let's go dancing, you and me.
The beautiful thing about Chris, why everyone loves Chris, is because he never forgot that he was Chris from Wisconsin. Just like with my family, laughter was a coping mechanism. I think we do the same thing with our drinking culture. We post stuff on social media like, isn't this funny? We got all the drunkest cities in the country here in the state. And ha ha ha. But is it that fun? Is it funny? It's not. I understand the coping mechanism going on there that humor can do. Humor is very powerful, but it's also, like it was with our family. If you go overboard, it turns into a trauma, and it's kind of traumatizing our state, I think.
Thanks for staying with us as we spend this National Recovery Month having candid conversations about substance use disorders and the stigmas that surround them. Our next story brings us to the Janesville area, where a mother is speaking out about alcohol, a substance that took her daughter's life yet surrounds many here in the Badger State.
Pretty much everyone is going to know someone that has either an alcohol or drug addiction or problem with it at some point in their life, even if you never know it because people hide it because of the stigma. So I'm Jenny Hallett, and my daughter is Brittany Rose Hallett, and she actually died from alcohol addiction on November 5th, 2014. Brittany was just a very loving person. She was a straight A student her entire life, and that was due to her own drive. She had a boyfriend that she was living with, and I suspect that it was probably known to him. They ended up splitting up, and so she came to live with me at my house, just trying to help her get her feet back under her, and I had no idea there was any issue. But it didn't take long for me to finally realize that there was a problem. My son called me at work one day and said that she was talking to people that weren't in the room. So she was literally hallucinating, which I have now found out is a sign of alcohol withdrawal. That was really when I realized that there was a real major problem, and we ended up sending her to the hospital pretty early on. We actually got her an apartment. We were trying to give her a fresh start. Got a 2-bedroom because we wanted her to be able to get somebody that was in recovery, to be with her. And but the deal was I got to monitor her. I could come over at any moment. I had a breathalyzer. And it was just a few days into it, she drank again. And so I had her come home, and it just kind of spiraled from there. That's exactly where the alcohol took her down. She drank on campus just like all her friends did, but it affected her dramatically differently. It's definitely disease. Your brain adapts to the alcohol, and at that point, people are drinking or taking drugs to feel normal again at that point. And that's what my daughter said all the time. I drink to feel normal, even just for a moment, Obviously, you can't sustain that because alcohol is toxic. She had an acute addiction. She had the highest blood alcohol content, and that the 1 ER doctor ever saw anyone survive at 0.62. 0.40 could put most people in a coma or kill them. Basically, they told me if I didn't let them send her up there, I had to take her home. And I said, and she looked at me, my daughter looked at me, and she goes, "I wish my mom was here," to me. And they made me take her home before. I said, "Can I at least wait till she knows who I am?" And they said, "If you're not going to send her up there, you need to take her home." I had to drive her home, fearing that she would maybe open the car door while I'm driving. So there's stigma even in the medical world. There really is. And some of the doctors were wonderful, but many of them truly just treated me also like I was scum. Insurance is just extremely difficult to go through the red tape. Every single time my daughter needed help, she went through this like a good 1.5 years of severe, hospitalizations, going to treatment and that kind of thing. And every time that she needed help, you had to go through getting an assessment, which you got to wait a week or two. So she went to all types of treatment, but there was just so much red tape to get her help. And towards the end, she turned 26, so she was no longer on her dad's insurance. And so now she wasn't even covered. I feel like if she would have gotten that letter, it would have crushed her, and I probably never would have even known she'd gotten it. Once she couldn't go to college because of the addiction, well, now you're not in college, so your student loan debt starts accruing interest. And yet she couldn't even get out of bed to save herself. And so she would get these statements every month of interest rate, it's just growing and growing. And I think she just didn't know how. It was too overwhelming to even begin. And it's a horrifying disease to witness, to see your daughter slowly die and no one will help. And there's nowhere to send them. And you don't know what to do to help them. And I was labeled an enabler. I know people that are alive today because they were thrown out of the house. I know it can work. I know that. I know people that's worked on. And my daughter, I had people telling me to do that. That would not have worked with her. She wasn't abandoned in a car someplace where she, be taken advantage of, raped, who knows, or killed, and die feeling nobody loved them. I could never have survived that, Yes, she did still die, but I think she would have died sooner if I'd done that.
Welcome back. Our last story of stigma tonight comes from Madison. With more than 4 decades of law enforcement experience under his belt, one father is sharing his story about how addiction can impact any family.
I was in Washington, D.C. area on 9/11. That was one of the most devastating things I've ever experienced in this country. As a police chief at the state capitol during Act 10, very devastating, very challenging. But the loss of a child, there's just no answers. I'm Charles Tubbs Sr. My son Charles Tubbs Jr. lost his life, CJ, to an overdose of marijuana laced with fentanyl. For devastating parents of losing their son. It's the most devastating thing can ever happen to a parent, is to lose a child. It's just not meant to be like that. I mean, we'll never, ever fully recover. You look at each other and say, what could we have done better? You have, again, outsiders, even sometimes loved ones and family members say, what happened to that family? What went wrong? It's not about that. Anytime, any given moment, anyone can become a victim of an overdose. My son CJ, again, I think he looked at some of his shortcomings and utilized marijuana to deal with his illnesses and self-medicating. And that's one of the most dangerous things you can do. Once he got into treatment and began accepting the treatment, our young man CJ became, we call him CJ, became the young man that we had raised as a young child. He was just a fine young man. He had decided at that time he wanted to turn his life around and come back. And he moved back home with us. He wanted to go back to school. As I say, he began looking at colleges to return back. He felt he could still participate in, he's a very good athlete in sports, and he wanted to get a degree in helping people. He came home the next morning early. He appeared to be fine. He was all set to go out for the yard, do some work around the house to help out. I told him it was a holiday. It was Memorial Day, we'll do that tomorrow. We'll just have a nice dinner. And he was all set. I made barbecue ribs, and he loved my ribs and loved my cooking. So he said, okay. And so he laid down to take a nap on the couch. And he was fine. And so later on in the morning, my wife called him to get up so we could eat and share the holiday together with the rest of the family. And he didn't respond. So she called me, and I came into the room, and I went over to see what was going on. I looked at his hands and his lips, and I saw my son was in trouble. They took him at that time out to the ambulance, take him to the hospital, and they did get a heartbeat in the ambulance. We responded to the hospital, met him. We knew he was in a very gravely situation. Praying all the way. My wife and I stood by his side as much as we could. He was admitted, of course. He remained unconscious and on life support. The next day at about 1 o'clock, we met with the doctors and learned that he was going to be declared brain dead. But like I said, he had really cleaned himself up. He had taken a blood test and other tests where he had no substance in his systems prior to that. I really want to set the record that people who are using substances and who are addicted are facing a serious illness. I mean, people say it's not an illness, they got a choice, they can quit. But that's not always true. And I find it very disgusting when I hear people refer to people as throwaways. They're lost. Lock them up. Put them in prison. When treatment is the best answer. Every day, I carry in my pocket every day since before my son passed away. That's how I had them so readily available. I carry Narcan. I carry at least 2 vials every single day of my life because you, me, or any one of us can become a victim of an overdose. We can get tough on drugs, get tough on laws, and all those things we say. And those are all part of the system, but just getting tough and locking people up is not the answer. I've been in this work too long that I know and I believe in my heart, all people are good. All people make mistakes. What do we want? We want a person to come back who's going to maybe be a productive human being and fit into the community, or do we want to bring back a person who's been caged and has not been given treatment and prepared to deal with society? I think it's a no-brainer. Treatment is the answer.
As a society, we can't end stigmas if we don't have tough conversations and share stories like these. Though our state can feel pretty divided these days, we share a lot more in common than we sometimes realize. You might not know someone who is struggling, but chances are you do know someone who does. We hope the resources we shared with you tonight can help. For all of us here at Spectrum News, I'm Anthony DeBruzzi. Thanks for watching.